The Trump GOP tax cuts proved to be a dud for our economy and a political loser for the Republican Party. You may remember they thought in 2017 they'll run on this in 2018 and win landslides in the House and Senate. And by the time 2018 rolled around, November, they weren't even talking about it. It was so unpopular with the American people because they knew it was aimed at the very, very highest elites who have plenty of money. While Republicans don't seem to learn from their mistakes. The Republican-led House Ways and Means Committee will advance a sweeping array of new tax giveaways that reward the wealthy and the well-connected while leaving ordinary families in the lurch. The latest GOP tax scam feels like a bad rerun, where the biggest winners are giant companies, big oil polluters, ultra wealthy households. After the Trump tax law blew a nearly $2 trillion hole in our national debt, forecasters say this new Republican proposal would increase the debt by another $1 trillion. Can you believe this? Just 2 weeks after these hard-right Republicans are arguing that we have too much debt and we got to reduce the deficit, they are now arguing for a huge reduction just so they can give tax breaks to their very ultra-wealthy friends. Before the ink is even dry on avoiding default, the same Republicans want to blow another $1 trillion hole into the deficit. What hypocrisy. What hypocrisy. Of course, they only care about the deficit when it suits them. We all saw it last time when they pushed for tax cuts for the ultra wealthy in 2017. There was no trickle down stemming from that huge benefit Republicans gifted the wealthy. In fact, for a decade, ever since the days of Jude Wanniski, for those old-timers who remember him, this idea that trickle-down works has been totally discredited, trickle-down in taxes. Instead, what happened after 2017, the Trump tax cuts translated into huge profits for shareholders. We saw trillions of dollars in corporate stock buybacks. We saw the vast majority of Americans reject these Republican policies. So if Republicans really want to help working and middle-class families, if they really want to lower the deficit, as they've claimed for years, they'll stop pushing this irredeemably flawed tax package. It's time to get to work, to focus on what matters for American families. Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Schumer, and good afternoon. And I would just say also, here they go again. The reality is that Republicans never met a problem that couldn't be solved with another tax cut for the wealthy. If there's a problem, hey, I know, let's give another tax cut to the wealthy. If the economy's up, they deserve a tax cut. If the economy's down, they deserve a tax cut. We have seen this movie over and over and over again, and you know what? It's never worked. What does work is investing in America. They aim to the wealthy at the top. We aim right at the middle class. That's what we have been doing. And it shows. We are rebuilding America. We are bringing jobs home. I can tell you from a manufacturing state, we are elated at the manufacturing renaissance going on right now in our country. And we are looking at over 13 million jobs being added to the U.S. economy in less than 2.5 years. That's what happens when you invest in America and you bring jobs home and you invest in our people. The other thing we have done to invest in our people is lower prescription drug prices. They give a big tax cut, a 40% tax cut in their plan that they passed before for big pharma. We instead say, how about a $35 cap per month on insulin for people on Medicare? As of July 1, people on Medicare are going to see their costs for Part B drugs, cancer treatments, other kinds of drugs that are given in the doctor's office and the hospital's office. They're going to see as much as $449 per dose in reduction because of what we did together as Democrats last year. And we say, hey, you know what? The wealthiest ought to pay their fair share. So the Republican plan would undo all of that, would erase about 150,000 good-paying jobs, a big $10 billion tax giveaway to big oil, and when all is said and done, it would be another close to $1 trillion in the deficit. So one more time, Republicans are choosing the wealthy and the well-connected We stand with the middle class in our country.
Sorry, Deb.
Senator Whitehouse.
Oh, there you are.
The voice of God, as it were. So we are just emerging from the shadow of the MAGA default crisis, a completely fabricated and unnecessary crisis that thankfully President Biden was able to defuse. And just a quick word back at that. Remember the Republican proposal to kill 700,000 jobs and likely provoke a recession. That was what the bill that came out of the House, that was their alternative to a default, promised the American people. Note also that that bill, 275 out of 315 pages, were for the benefit of the fossil fuel industry, their overlords. So now they come forward with a tax program, and no surprise, it benefits their overlords, the big mega donors, and the fossil fuel industry. It adds to the deficit, so much for their fabled concerns about the deficit. It rolls back the IRA's clean energy provisions that are already working. We have the quotes from the Republican members of Congress attending the events in their own districts. It would repeal, believe it or not, polluter superfund taxes, and it would encourage companies, big companies that can do this, to hide their profits overseas, to dodge taxes so they can compete against small businesses more effectively. We've got a very different idea, which is restore the child tax credit. It really worked. Make billionaires pay higher tax rates than teachers and firefighters. That's just basic fairness. And prevent big American corporations from offshoring their revenues and dodging their tax responsibilities so that there are no longer American corporations that pay zero in federal income taxes. And I'll close by saying if you want to have a little fun about the Trump tax cuts never having trickled down, go watch Senator Kane's examination of our witnesses in the Budget Committee on this subject. It is run up pretty hot on YouTube because he did a masterful job. It's worth the look. And with that, Senator White.
Thank you.
Wait.
Did you get a chance to speak?
Yeah.
Thanks. Joe, thanks. I'll get out of the chairman's way, but let me just say.
As my first grade teacher used to say, Ron was tardy. Charles is tardy.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence. Let me give you a perspective on all this from Colorado. You know, if there were a mayor in our state, this has never happened as far as I know in the history of my state, but if there were a mayor of our state that went to their citizens and said, we're going to borrow a whole bunch of money that like we've never borrowed before, people would say, well, that worries me. What are you going to spend that on? Are you going to spend it on parks? No. Are you going to spend it on infrastructure? No. Are you going to spend it on mental health that we so desperately need? No. Are you going to spend it on the library? No. Are you going to spend it on a child tax credit? It'll cut child poverty in our... Nope. What are you going to spend it on? I'm going to take this money that I'm borrowing, the more money that we've ever borrowed, and I'm going to give it to the two wealthiest neighborhoods in our community and expect that somehow it's going to trickle down to everybody else. That sounds crazy, but that is their tax policy. That is a tax policy that they've now been following for decades, and it has resulted in over half of the government borrowing that we're now confronting as a country. And faced with the reality of that, complaining about, I suppose, their own fiscal irresponsibility in their effort to give the richest people in the country tax cuts at a moment when we've had the worst income inequality that we've had since the 1920s, they then decided they wanted to hold this government hostage and blow up the full faith and credit of the United States. And there's a reason why Joe Biden was able to cut such a good deal with these guys, and that's because the American people are onto them. They understand what they're doing. They've seen this movie before, and they're seeing it again right here. And I think in stark contrast is what we are proposing and saying, which is that even if we support some of what they're trying to do, for example, on the R&D tax credit, a version of that, that we're not going to be inclined to do that unless we can see support for the child tax credit, support for the earned income tax credit. There are 19 million children today who are not benefiting from the full child tax credit because of what the other side has done. Half the kids in the country have fallen back into poverty because we weren't able to extend the child tax credit, which cut childhood poverty in half, reduced hunger in America by a quarter for families. So I think there's a place we can end up here that hopefully would be of much more use to the American people, much more use to the people living in that hypothetical town where for the life of them nobody understands why you would borrow money to give people in this country who are the wealthiest people in the largest corporations yet another tax cut. They don't understand it, and they never will. Senator Schumer said we can't talk about other news, so I'm conscious of that. But let me just say this: go Nuggets.
Other news?
Go Nuggets.
Go Nuggets.
And I give you Ron White, a basketball player.
As the Jewish people would say, oi. And my colleagues have said it so well. I just have a couple of comments. First, we have had the Finance Committee staff scrubbing this Republican tax proposal. And what I can tell you is, overall, this Republican tax package is cut from the same cloth as the 2017 tax bill. And if I were to send one message about it, this House bill puts the benefits for the people at the top up here. The mega wealthy, the big corporations, they're here. And the working families get a token that's around here. That's kind of my assessment about it. And the fact is, not only is this not fair, this defies the way the Senate Finance Committee and leadership on both sides of the aisle has always worked. We've always worked for a tax package that's proportional. You just heard Senator Bennett, the champ with Senator Brown of the child tax credit, spell it out. We're very strong supporters of research and development and that tax credit. Senator Schumer leading us on the China package so we can compete better in that part of the world. So we like that a lot. But the package for working families has got to be proportional. You can't have this big gap between the top and folks over here. So that's really our bottom line. And the other point I'd like to make, because we're so proud at the Finance Committee of having taken the lead for the clean energy package, the $300 billion worth of tax credits, once again, the Republicans are trying to turn back the clock. Manufacturing in much of this country is now doing quite well because we led the effort on innovation, which was to no small part about clean energy. So ultimately, this legislation, as so much of their flawed economics, is another big gift to China. And that's why we have a very different alternative. My colleagues have talked about it. That's what we're going to fight for, because it puts us on the side of working people and kids and families and creating the kind of innovation that our country needs. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Ronald. Yes, Ranu.
Senator Vance just announced he's going to place a hold on all DOJ nominees other than Marshall nominees given the Trump indictment. Can you respond to that? And more broadly, the Republican criticism of the Justice Department has declined to prosecute Hillary Clinton over classified records, but is prosecuting Donald Trump.
Look, I'd say this. First, I'm not familiar with what Vance said, so I'm not going to comment on it. In terms of the Trump indictment, no one's above the law, including Donald Trump, and there ought to be no political or ideological interference as the case moves forward. Yes. This nice man right here. Yes. Surprise. He's surprised I called on him.
Speaker McCarthy says that he wants to have a debate about restructuring the FBI. Is that a debate the Senate should have as well?
Look, the bottom line is, again, we don't need political interference. We need strong law enforcement, and Donald Trump's not above the law, plain and simple. Yes.
The House is now going to go to 22 levels. Another
Yeah, the bottom line is that I don't think that would have much support in the Senate among Democrats or Republicans.
Senator Schumer.
Yes.
Senator Schumer,
Bolton and then you.
Mike Rounds says that there's no question Trump's indictment is going to create a headwind for Republicans and make it tougher to take back the Senate in 2024. Do you agree with that?
No comment.
House Democrats have put together some discharge petitions on gun-related bills over in the House. You had a conference or conversation with your caucus a couple weeks ago about gun. Are you going to bring any gun-related
Yeah,
bills?
we're having very serious discussions on how the best way forward to move forward on guns is. What they're sending over is just awful. It allows you to conceal what is in effect an assault weapon. And that's been used in many of the killings. The killing in Tennessee. When you can convert a handgun into an assault-like weapon, you can conceal it because you can't see the barrel. That's been used in a good number of the recent killings. When you saw that horrible picture of those poor children going away on the bus where 3 of their 9-year-old classmates had been killed, and you realize it was that gun that did it, it's just appalling that they're doing this. Last one.
Background check?
Last one.
Okay, you have your AI briefing coming up here shortly. What is it that you hope senators take out of this? And Senator Durbin said that he's hopeful but skeptical that there could be some sort of AI legislation.
Look, it's a very difficult issue, but we're off to a very good start. You can't ignore this issue because it's going forward. So it can go forward where we can maximize the benefits and minimize the liabilities, or ignore it. We're not ignoring it. And we have a bipartisan group composed of Senator Rounds, Senator Heinrich, Senator Young, and myself. We've asked our committees to look in all their various jurisdictions at what should be done. This is the first of 3 briefings. So we're making good progress. Is it an easy issue? No. Does it have to be tackled in the best possible way? Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.